Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. Now, a few years ago I did a program which covered the work of Stan Myers, and I showed some electronic circuits that I'd developed in order to try and repeat some of his inventions. Stan Myers was an inventor who invented things in the 1980s. In the 1990s, he's American. Now, in the mid-90s, the American military showed interest in some of Stan Myers' work, and they tried to secretize some of his technology. And then in 1997, he died in very mysterious circumstances. He came out of a restaurant, said he'd been poisoned, and he dropped down dead. So there's a lot of people think that Stan Myers' technology really did work. Now, let's just explain briefly what he is alleged to have invented. The thing that he's most noted for is the water fuel cell. So this is a container of water with metal tubes in it. Electricity is pulsed across the tubes. Hydrogen and oxygen are then generated. That hydrogen and oxygen can then be used to power a car or any other sort of engine. Now, the thing about the Myers fuel cell is that it was alleged that it broke the law of conservation of energy. So in other words, the amount of electrical energy to create the hydrogen and oxygen was less than the amount of energy when the hydrogen and oxygen is burnt off. Now, most scientists would immediately dismiss that such a device could work without even looking at it. Now, I don't belong to any company, I don't belong to any organization, I don't work for the government, and what that means is that I can look at inventions such as the Stan Myers water fuel cell and investigate them without being ridiculed, without having any pressure or peer pressure for someone saying, "Oh, why are you looking at that? It's obviously a fake." I'm not arrogant enough to say, well, that can't possibly work because it breaks the law of conservation of energy. But at the same time, I'm not ignorant enough to say, oh, well, that must work because he was poisoned in a restaurant. Further investigation is required. I believe the only way you can find out if there's any truth about this device is to try and build one yourself, and that's what I've been trying to do. Essentially, Myers took his water fuel cell and he incorporated it into a motor vehicle, so he's driving around America in a car, a buggy, that's powered by water. A car powered by water. Imagine the ramifications to the planet if you can produce a car that you could just fill up at your local reservoir. Think about it, right? Now, and think about why Stan Myers may have been murdered. Now, before I go through the Myers design and what I've tried to replicate, let's just look at this law of conservation of energy, because this is where physicists and engineers get upset if the device appears to be breaking the law of conservation of energy. They don't like it. But I think it's possible to modify that law and keep everyone happy. Let's have a look at the law. Yes. Okay, so the law of conservation of energy in physics states that the total energy of an isolated system cannot change. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Right? So you can't get energy from nowhere, in other words. Now, if the Myers device does work, and if other devices which are alleged to break that law work, such as the Bedini motor, Adam Trombley's homopolar generator, Bruce De Palma's N machine, various other devices that allegedly break this law, I would modify the law. And this is how I would do it. So I'll quote the law again. The total energy of an isolated system cannot change. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Fine. This is how I would change it. The total energy of an isolated system which does not exchange energy from the quantum vacuum cannot change. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Because these devices, this is what they're allegedly doing. They're tapping into energy from the vacuum, from space itself. They're not getting their energy from matter, from atoms. They're getting it from the fabric of space itself. So this is an energy exchange which isn't in our physics textbooks, but possibly can be achieved. Energy can be extracted from the fabric of space, and if it is being extracted from the fabric of space, then it will appear to come from nowhere. Now, a bit later I will give you my hypothesis as to where I think that energy is coming from. But let's just look first at what Stan Myers did. There's a lot of stuff on the internet, there's forums, there's a lot of people on the internet who've built devices like the one I've built here, who've probably got further than I have. But the problem is, it's very difficult to verify people's claims unless you go meet them and you measure their kit with your own test equipment. But there are people who have achieved some of what Stan Myers done with regards over Unity, they call it. This is an over Unity device. But I don't know whether it works, and I don't know whether I don't know. But you're not going to find out unless you build one, are you? So this is what I'm trying to do. So now there are several variations on the Myers device. Some of them are mains powered, some of them are powered by 12 volts DC, others use a car alternator to provide the electricity for the pulses. So there's various different configurations. Now, we do have a few problems with Stan Myers. The first is that he was not, let's say, classically trained in electronics. He was self-taught. So when you look at his circuits and you look at his circuit diagrams, you realize that they're not drawn like you would maybe learn if you went to a university, right? Which makes them difficult to follow. He doesn't provide detailed parts lists, and he doesn't provide proper ISO standard engineering drawings that you could easily follow and you could actually build your own device. So they're more sort of schematics. Here's a classic example of a Myers schematic. All right, it's not really telling you exactly which component from RS you need to buy and connect to what. So that's the first problem. His designs aren't 100% specific. The second problem is that when he obtained his patents, and he has got patents for this technology, the patent office had to issue him with the patents because he demonstrated that his over Unity device was producing, or his water fuel cell was producing vast quantities of hydrogen and oxygen. Now, but Myers himself said that once he submitted the actual description of his device, he changed certain parts of it, or he omitted certain important parts so that you couldn't build it from the information in the patent, and he did that deliberately to protect his invention. But we will go on what there is available and then maybe try and modify what we've got in order to try and hunt for this secret part of his design. Alright, so what did Stan Myers do? Let's just explain. The water fuel cell houses half a dozen tubes. Now these tubes consist of actually of two tubes. You've got a stainless steel tube, right, which is, the wall is about 1.5 millimeters thick, and then you put another stainless steel tube inside it. Now these ones that have, well actually Dave Worsdale did these for me, you can see they've got plastic pips there on them, because we've got holes drilled, 3 holes drilled around the circumference. So I'll just put that last pip in there. You can see that slots in, and then they act as spacers, so you can put the one tube inside the other, and that should sit nice and snug. You can push that in there. So we've got one tube inside the other, so we've got a gap of about, it's actually 1.5 millimeters, and I'm going to come on to that gap in a minute. So we've got 2 stainless steel tubes, one inside the other. That then goes inside water. I'm using distilled water, which is another variable in all of this, the type of water. So you've got 6 tubes identical to this, and these are electrodes. We then apply pulsed electricity across these 2 electrodes through 2 particular coils. And then the hydrogen oxygen then bubbles off and then can be collected and used to power an engine or what have you. That's the principle of the Myers device. So you've got several variables here. You've got the circuit itself that produces the high voltage pulses. You've got the tubes, so you can modify the gap in the tubes. You've got the type of water that you use. But I think the important thing is the electronics, which we're going to look at now. And that is the circuit that I've built here is based on the Myers 8XA circuit. If you want to look up that on the internet. So what we've got mains voltage coming in. We've got a variable transformer so that the 240 voltage coming in can be turned from 0 up to 240. That voltage is then just put through a basic rectifier, so we get rectified voltage coming out. That is then fed through a thyristor, so it's switching it very, very fast through a blocking diode, which again allows electricity to just flow in one direction. That then goes through two induction coils. Now we've got these here. Now they're wound rather differently to a normal coil. It's a bifilar winding, which means that there's actually two windings on the same core. So your pulsed DC comes out of the voltage intensifier circuit. It goes through the coil, across the electrodes, and then it comes back and it goes through the coil again. So you've effectively got two coils either side of your capacitor or your water cell, because electrically this is effectively a capacitor. So you've got an inductor either side of it with pulsed DC voltage going onto it. And according to Myers, it's the fact that you've got these two inductors either side of the cell which is important. He talks about resonance. Now I'm dubious as to whether there's any resonance in this, but I think it's more of what I would describe as a pumping circuit, because you're getting pulsed DC, and each pulse raises the voltage each time, and then what happens at some point when the voltage gets to a particular level across the plates, the water cracks and creates hydrogen and oxygen. We come on to how this device is working. Now, I've looked at the Bedini motor. Now, the Bedini motor, there are people who have measured whether the Bedini motor is getting energy from somewhere, and it appears to be that way. Now, the Bedini motor has two coils, one which pushes a wheel around, and the other one which charges a battery. Now, Stan Myers believed that the excess energy in his device was being tapped from between the plates, that there was something in the water, that was some resonant frequency of water, which made the water molecule split much easier. Now, I'm not sure he's correct there. I actually think that the excess energy is possibly coming from the two coils either side of the electrodes. And the reason why I come to that conclusion is because of the Bedini motor, because the Bedini motor is another over unity device where the excess energy appears to be coming from the electrical coil when its field collapses. So a certain amount of energy is put into the coil to magnetize it, to create the magnetic field. That is then switched. The field collapses, but it appears to be dragging more energy from that collapsing field into the battery in the Bedini motor. So I think where the energy is coming from in some of these over unity devices is in a collapsing magnetic field from an inductor, but it's how you capture that. So the Bedini motor, it's been used to charge a battery, and I think in the Myers device you've got these two coils either side of your. I think the excess energy is being used to crack water. Alright? So, but I'm open to a debate on that. In the Myers circuit, you have he had some electronics using 555 timers and that kind of thing to generate these various pulses. I'm actually using just a personal computer, and I've got it connected to I've got a digital output connected to the parallel port, which is driving an optocoupler which switches the thyristor on and off however I want it to. There's some software I've written on this PC. It's running on a DOS platform. It's Turbo C, which allows me, this is my control screen, I can generate those pulses, anything up to 80 kilohertz, that's 80,000 times a second pulses. They drive the thyristor, which is inside here. The output from that is run through these two coils into the cell and back around. Now, so let's just demonstrate that. So we've got mains coming in now. We turn the voltage up, so let's put it up to 70 volts. If I hit the number 1 key, that will start the pulses, so the thyristor will trigger and we'll get something on the scope. You see there, so this is the voltage signal across the actual cell, and see the current's pretty low here, but occasionally what I've noticed, what happens is you increase the voltage and suddenly the current will go right up, and you'll get more gases coming off. I've not had huge amounts of gas, certainly not over unity. You can hear the thyristor switching. What I'm going to do now, I'm just going to show you the inside of this box, and then once I've done that, we're going to try and film some gases coming off. All right. So this is our variable transformer, which just goes through a bridge rectifier. The output from the bridge rectifier feeds the voltmeter. It also feeds the thyristor. So here's our thyristor here. The output from the thyristor, you can see there it's got a diode, a reverse diode across it. There's also, this is the blocking diode here. We've also got some protection on the input voltage, which we've got, I think it's a 5 amp trip, which is up in the front there, which is this thing here. I can actually press it, so that thing should pop out if the whole thing draws more than 5 amps, just a safety device. So our optocouplers, well, that one there is not used. This is the optocoupler which is connected to the computer. So the signals from the PC's parallel port come in here. So that's just I think it might be 5 volts. So they come in, they're wired into one end of the optocoupler, and then the other end of the optocoupler triggers the gate on the thyristor. What the current from the thyristor then goes through this diode and then through the ammeter, which is in the front panel here, and then when it then comes out the front panel. I did have a coil inside, but this is redundant now. That coil is not used. This is the coil here which I've wound myself. It's a bifilar coil. In other words, there's actually 2 coils wound on the same core, and this apparently is one of the important things of the Myers device. So the current comes out, it goes well, it's through this copper wire here, through the coil, across the cell, and then back down. Now there's some debate over whether you wire the 2 coils in opposition or supporting each other. In other words, so that the fields are aligned. Now I've got them supporting each other. I've researched quite a bit of stuff on the internet, and I don't think you wire them such that the magnetic field in and out are against each other. I think that you have to do it so that they're supporting each other. We can have in this Tesco coffee jar, we can have a second cell in there, but I'm just using one at the moment. We've got an amp going through there now, 100 volts. We've got gases coming off there. Right, so we can see there we've got the voltage is 100 volts. We've got just under 2 amps, so we're just under 200 watts. And you can see there's quite a lot of gas coming off. Now it would be a question of collecting that gas and measuring the volume and ask, well, is it higher than the 200 watts? Now, I'm not sure whether our pulses are triggering this thyristor correctly, because you see that the scope there, it's only been triggered once every mains cycle, and it should be, if you look at the Myers literature, they're triggering much faster than that. So I think there's a problem with the triggering, but that's just to demonstrate there that we have got hydrogen and oxygen coming off there, but skeptics would say that that hydrogen and oxygen is just a result of bog standard electrolysis for the energy that's going in. But I wouldn't know until I've measured it. You see, that the current there, in my opinion, is too high. We've got that needs to be limited in some way, but in a way that the gas still comes off. And this is what this current sensor circuit is going to do. Now I've got this rig set up and I can generate small amounts of hydrogen and oxygen. The thing then to do is to modify various sections of it in order to try and get more yield of gases. Now, one of the things that I've decided to put in is to add a current sensor on the main wire going through the cell, and then put it through a comparator so that you then feed that signal back into the computer. So in other words, once the current gets above a certain level, the computer knows that and then can switch off the output pulses. Because the whole intention of this design is to try and limit the current and get the voltage as high as you can. But as my understanding, as soon as the water is cracked, the current increases and you need to back off. So what I'm going to do is, as I say, put a current sensor in there, and then so the computer knows as soon as the current is above a particular threshold value, it will cease firing pulses and turn the thyristor off and stop any current flowing. So that's one modification I've yet to do. The other enhancement is to try and decrease the air gap, or it's not an air gap, decrease the water gap in the. So what I've actually done, I've bought a slightly different wall thickness tube. Right, so I'm just on my way to a little engineering company who I've asked to weld this M6 threaded bar onto this stainless steel tube. So they've just got to fix it like that. Here we are, it's Rokel Engineering. Right, I got two of these made. As you can see, they've made a good job of the weld, and charged me 10 quid for the two. And that will reduce the gap down to 0.9 of a millimetre, which is a fair bit less than it is now. So that should increase the amount of volts per centimetre, therefore encouraging the electrolysis. So there's all kinds of, I mean, you can modify the pulse widths, the frequencies. There's all kinds of things we can play around with here in order to try and achieve what Myers did. I would like to set up some sort of meeting at some point with interested parties, either people who are interested in putting maybe some money into it, or people who've got specific expertise in electronics or physics or electrolysis or software even, to come together and you know, perhaps we can set up a working group to investigate the Myers technology and other technologies. Now there are a number of groups that have been set up, and the reason why I laugh is because I don't trust any of them, and I think they're there to see what people are doing and see what's going on. But this group will not be that. This group will be well, we're trying to get scientific proof that over unity is achievable.
You are going to need a number of minds on this, get some skilled people together that can solve different parts of the problem. But you know, as you mentioned in the video there, the groups that have been in operation, you know, on and off over the last probably 50 years, they haven't really achieved very much. And there are certain individuals which don't seem to be that trustworthy. And I think, you know, we were talking, or just mentioned very briefly, Stephen Greer's group in the States. He tried to get some things going, and I've written a whole article about that called Something in the Aero, where I became very, very skeptical of what he was doing. And then also we've more recently had a group in the UK which was kind of an offshoot of this BCG, which is the British Constitution Group, which is itself associated with UK Column and, you know, and Brian Gerrish. but they are more focused on political objectives, and for example aspects of things like common law and this sort of thing. And of course Brian Gerrish has done a lot of good work in that area, and he's tried to be a champion for certain causes which have been fighting corruption.
Now, they set up this energy group a few years ago, which I believe is not running at the moment. It's disbanded or whatever.
Right.
And I did see one guy being interviewed by Brian Gerrish. He was talking about this new type of battery, which I believe used aluminium as a fuel. So it was a battery which you can't actually recharge using electricity. You had to remove a physical part of it and then replace it. And its unique selling point was that it lasted longer than a normal battery.
Yes.
Or stored more power per volume,
yes.
let's say.
Yes.
But not really solving the world's energy crisis. You have to manufacture the aluminium or whatever the fuel is, which requires energy in. So it's not an over-unity device. Certainly not getting energy from the vacuum, just a different type of battery using a solid fuel as opposed to a liquid
kind
fuel.
Or some catalyst within the aluminium or something to give it a higher energy density or something within the materials.
Now you got involved, or you got invited to one of their conferences, and you met this character called Mike
Clark.
Mike Clark.
We should tell the story of that, and I've told the story of this in a couple of the presentations I've done since you and I last discussed this topic on your program. I think it would have been back. It was in 2012. I think we did the program. I believe in September 2012, Richard. So just over 2 years ago now. And it was, I think, literally 2 or 3 weeks after that I did a talk in Birmingham about the free energy, Stan Meyer that you've talked about just now, and you mentioned Adam Trombley's device. I touched on all those things in the presentation as well. And it was after that meeting that this Mike Clark came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm Mike Clark. I'm a PhD physicist. I'm associated with the British Constitution Group. We're setting up this energy group to investigate energy technologies. Would you like to be involved?" And I said, yeah, I'd be interested in getting involved. And I met him in the pub, I think after this time, a couple of months later. And he said, "Oh yeah, we're getting some guys together and we're going to have this meeting." And I think this meeting was originally slated for, I think, late November or December 2012 or something. I can't remember when. And he also invited me to speak at the BCG conference, which was in November 2012. And this was attended by about 300 to 400 people at a hotel in Stoke. It was one of the largest audiences I've ever spoken to face to face, certainly.
Well, can I just stop you there, Andrew? Let's just have a look at what Mike Clark actually says in his intro. Yeah.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Roger, for letting me speak. My name is Michael Clark. I am a retired scientist, physicist by profession. So I have an inherent interest in energy systems, and in particularly alternative energy systems, which have been hidden from us deliberately. Now, a person better qualified than me to speak about new energy devices and how they were suppressed is Andrew Johnson, who I will introduce in a moment. But I will say this final thing. We are currently working on fuel devices that are classed as over unity. In other words, more energy out than in. We should have something by 2015 that will allow every individual that's part of the BCG or lawful bank to install a unit into their homes and derive free electricity. You will never have to be on the grid. Thank you. Thank you. We haven't done it yet, but we hopefully will do it. Everything's looking very, very positive at the moment. All the results we've had so far have been positive, and I'll keep all members of BCG through Roger and his newsletter up to date on what's going on. Now, the key element of having a device like that, whether it's going to be magnetic or a water fuel cell, which are some of the things we're working on, the key element of having a device like that is that we can offer it to non-members as an incentive to join Lawful Bank and British Constitution Group. Who in their right mind is going to turn down a unit that's going to give them free electricity? Nobody. So what a great carrot to swell the membership. Come and join us. We'll make sure you get one of these things. You will never have to pay electricity again. You can come off the grid. We don't want to give it back to them because we don't want anything to do with them, to be perfectly honest.
Right, so very clear statement there. By 2015 he's going to have an over Unity device that people who join the BCG group can install in their houses and get free electricity.
Pretty categorical, yeah. But he wasn't very clear in that statement whether it was going to be a water fuel cell such as the one you were explaining, the operation of in your video, or whether it was going to be some type of magnetic motor. But yeah, it was clear, and I thought, oh great, if they've got that far, then fantastic. There's obviously things that I don't know about. But he didn't disclose any of those details to me personally at that time in November 2012, and I didn't really see anything of him until next March 2013, I think it would have been. And he set up this meeting for about 10 or 12 people. And originally he said they were going to have some office space, and they were going to have a water fuel cell demonstration by this lady, I think was called Victoria, or I can't remember her second name. She had allegedly got one fitted to her car and was using it, and that was going to be demonstrated to the rest of us, so I was looking forward to seeing that. But then apparently this woman pulled out. We didn't see that working. We had this meeting, an agenda was sent out with about 10 points on the agenda. When we started the meeting, it started an hour late, and I thought, oh, we're really going to get through this before the 4 o'clock finish. The agenda that he gave out wasn't followed. I think we covered 1 or 2 of the points out of a list of about 8 or 9. There was another chap there called Oliver Smith. The meeting was recorded. There were several people that recorded it, and all the attendees knew that the meeting was being recorded, because I just got my voice recorder out. Either I was holding it or I'd put it in on the table in front of everybody, so they knew it was being recorded.
I'm going to call a close to the meeting, gentlemen.
Well, before you do that, Mike, could I just ask if there's any, because you mentioned previously, I was curious that you'd been involved with some water fuel cell development a few years ago. And
yeah, about 5 years ago.
I just wondered if there's any, so obviously if anybody with experience like that can be fed into this process. I mean,
not really.
Why would that be?
Because the tank cell is a much simpler and I think much more efficient way of moving forward, rather than trying to do high frequency electricity and pulsing it and messing around with it until you get exactly what you want.
So you're saying then from that development your experience was that you were using this...
It produced gas, but not very efficiently.
Right.
I think we were using 1.7 volts and 200 milliamps was our input current, and we were producing gas from a standalone cell, very much like Myers that he shows on his papers in his video.
Was that your goal to sort of reproduce the Myers cell?
No, my goal today...
No, sorry, then. At
that point it was purely an experiment.
Right.
It was purely to, what's this all about? Let's have a look at it. We built it and it worked after a fashion. That's not what I want to do.
Right, was this something
WFC is just a means to an end here.
Yeah.
We're looking for the most efficient way, whether it's WFC or not. It doesn't make no difference what the method is, as long as we achieve the desired result, which is to provide energy for people for free.
So in your opinion then, from that development previously, you think that was sort of...
No, I don't think it's not a way forward.
Right.
I don't think you could produce sufficient gas in quantity to drive the motor, to drive the electricity generator.
Right.
This has the tank cell is far better.
And was that you and a good group of guys, or was it?
Yeah, it was just about 3 or 4 friends.
Right.
We just got together, and lots of things we were doing at the time, not just WFC, lots of stuff. We built a little magnetic motor that was continually running, but not producing an awful lot of energy. But it was working on its own without any further input. But I think the tank cell has got the better possibility of actually achieving what we want to achieve quickly.
And you heard in the clip there that he said they didn't have a device. He had worked on water fuel cell development about 5 years ago, so we're saying 2008, but they didn't have anything that they felt they could take forward into a new development. So essentially he contradicted what he said 5 months earlier at the BCG meeting. He provided no evidence that he had any devices in development.
So it sounds like this promise of a working device by 2015 was a completely empty promise.
Yes, I think quite a few people were obviously disappointed by that, as one would be. But I was obviously trying to think, what was the reason behind this? Why was he trying to approach me and get me involved in this, when clearly there was nothing of any substance that was in development? I mean, it just seemed like yet another empty vessel.
There are a number of enhancements that I want to incorporate into what I'm doing with the Stan Myers water fuel cell. But I'd like to make an Adam Trombley device, which is a lot more expensive than a Myers device. You're probably talking tens of thousands to get the machining done and windings done and this kind of thing. And there's various different types of material. As I've suggested in the video, that I'm proposing that we set up a group. We set up our own group. And we're asking people to come forward with details about your expertise or your areas of interest, and how you think you can offer us some expertise and to develop some. Well, we'll be looking at existing claimed over Unity devices and then trying to repeat them. That would be my starting point. I'm happy for people to take the software that I've developed for this. I'm happy to produce parts lists and diagrams as to how I've made this. I'm even happy if anyone is willing to invest, is to build maybe 10 of these units and loan them to people who want to have a play with them and see if they can modify them or change them in some way in order to get what Myers achieved. How do you know that I'm genuine or that Andrew's genuine? Well, I guess you don't, Andrew. I guess.
Well, this is it. You have to build up trust over a period of time. I mean, you know, we have a track record now over the last couple of years that people can look at, and so they can get some information from that. But it is a huge problem with these groups being infiltrated and controlled. I mean, you and I were discussing earlier on about Stephen Greer and his groups. And to me, that is a clear example of how, how a group can be manipulated and infiltrated, and then they can feed that information back to whoever,
I think one of the principles would be that whatever's developed is transparent, and we publish details of what's found. We're not trying to hide anything.
Absolutely.
It's a public project, if you like, because if I can't do it, then perhaps someone else can do it, but maybe they need the kit. If anyone's willing to invest in this, please get in touch. In fact, if anyone's interested in general, please get in touch, richard@richplanet.net, because I think the more brains that we have working on this kind of stuff, the more likely we are to get somewhere with it. I don't claim that I'm going to be able to produce what Myers did with my skills, but maybe with some of my skills and what other people's knowledge, maybe we can crack it.
With the best will in the world, you can develop a Stan Myers cell which works and produces over Unity and so forth, or some type of arrangement of magnets which appears to some kind of advanced Bedini motor type of device which you can get energy out of. But can you make it run 24/7? Can you make it run reliably, or is it only going to run for a couple of months and then wear out and you have to replace all the parts? I mean, once you get a working device, that's only part of the engineering problem, because you then have to get it to produce enough power for enough time to actually be usable. And my issue is that when you want to go beyond that, you've got the sort of configuration correct, you've got the energy coming out, you can do it reliably, but it breaks every few hours or something. You've then got to go up a level, and you then have to go to a manufacturer, and you say, well, look, these are the parts, these are what we need to machine, give us a price for 10,000 units, and then you're going to be into the scenario of paying out hundreds of thousands of pounds, or for signing contracts, getting lawyers involved, getting health and safety people involved. And when you start to get up to that sort of level of technology, then it becomes known what you're doing.
Yeah, I would say that the objective would be to demonstrate that the principle works, that energy can be extracted from a source that they term the quantum vacuum, and it's a sea of energy which is almost limitless, and devices which could then be developed into workable solutions for domestic and industrial usages for free energy. Now, but you, in order to get that, to move on to that stage, you've got to be able to prove the principle. You've got to be able to prove absolutely that it works without any doubt, complete proof, and that would be what I would be after, to build a device which can categorically prove it once and for all, and be tested at any university, and then that is then published, and no one can go on Wikipedia and say, "Oh, this doesn't work," like they've done with Myers. So that would be what I'd be looking for, and then to publish that design, the design which demonstrates the principle, and then the world, once that's online or wherever, anyone in the world could then take that and develop it into a solution. But you would then say, well, what's the point in doing it? How are you going to make money out of it? Well, are we really that sort of selfish that we think it's just about making ourselves rich?
Well, I think again you're down to the problem that you could make a device yourself with your own, blood, sweat and tears, so to speak. But if you wanted to mass produce it, you're going to have to get somebody else involved. And that's where the money becomes more of an issue. The money, when you're just building maybe one or two of these devices, it's not really an issue necessarily, because you can do it off your own back, you can do it in your spare time, you can do it with your own funds that you would spend on a hobby or something. But when you go to a larger scale than that, that is when you run into the problems. And this has happened time and again. This has happened over and over and over again. The Australian guys, look at the Lutech generator, which we talked about. That's exactly what they did. They produced this device, they got it to work, they got more energy out than in.
This is the LEA. It's the Lutech electricity amplifier. You see we're running a number of lights as a resistive load on the right hand side. As we go across to the left, we see our meters. We take our DC input. The DC input in this case is 280 watts. The DC output, as we get on the four bottom meters, that's the AC, is 636 watts. We divide 280 by 630 into 636. We get 227% efficiency.
They had people to independently verify that it worked, and then a few months after that, we never heard from them again. And their website went down, and now I think has gone completely offline. So it's disappeared without trace. So people then assume it was all a con, and that's that.
There are some devices which perhaps are not over unity, which are perhaps getting their energy by converting matter into energy, as per Einstein's famous equation, such as cold fusion and the ECAT-Rossi device. The ECAT-Rossi device, this is an Italian ex-con. Tell us about that, Andrew. Yeah,
well, this we were just discussing this a bit earlier, and this happened, I think, in 2011. There was a story that came out that this Rossi, who was an Italian guy, and today I learned he was actually in prison. He developed the idea or the design of this while he was in prison in Italy, which sort of raises an eyebrow. And he produced this device, which he alleges is something similar to cold fusion. It's a process similar to cold fusion, but he doesn't disclose exactly what this process is. But it's a process which produces heat in some kind of vessel, and he uses a nickel compound, and you put some heat around this cell to get it going, so you heat it up to 60 degrees centigrade, then the reaction starts and it becomes self-sustaining. And he alleges that when you get this self-sustaining mode going and you leave it running for several hours, you'll end up having got out more energy than you've put in.
I would think that the Adam Trombley device, I mean, I think he's still alive, Adam Trombley.
Yes, he is, yeah.
The patent has probably got enough information in it to be able to draw up a set of engineering drawings and then build it in a machine shop. You know, so if there's anyone out there with a decent machine shop who wants to, well, maybe get a bit of publicity by helping us machine some components and maybe draft those components, get in touch. Or come to our meeting if we're going to have one. Thanks for talking to me again today, Andrew.
Welcome.
And hopefully we can report back, maybe in the summer perhaps, that we've got some group together that's going to look into some of these free energy devices.